Hey everyone, it is Go Power Cat publisher Tim Fitzgerald, and welcome to Go Power Cat's Signing Day Special. Over the next hour or so, we're going to dig in deep on this recruiting class for the Kansas State Wildcats. Wednesday was signing day all across college football. It's classified as early signing period, but as we now know, most of the prospects sign on this day, and there will be some that can sign in the later signing period. And it's interesting for a program like K-State. They'll sift around and see if anyone missed out that was of enough quality to go ahead and add to the class at a later date. But with only 15 players in this class, you might wonder, why is it so small? Well, keep in mind, you have to stay at your 85 scholarships overall. K-State's getting up there. The COVID bonus year, as I referred to it, this will be the last kind of wave of guys, but some players are coming back for that, and that counts in your 85. And of course, you got to leave some of those openings for those late finds, and the transfer portal is such a key part of everything now. You have to have room to take those transfers that you need at key positions. So recruiting has gotten very complex for the coaching staff. I can tell you one thing that's really changed is there's no reason to take chances on guys late in the class to just fill it up. There is no thing as filling up a class anymore, because while some of those guys did turn out to be legitimate players, a lot of them washed out and moved on. But now with the transfer portal, you can fill up your class at a later date, bring in some proven players that will help you more immediately on the field. As I mentioned, there's 15 guys in this class. 9 of them will be in early for Kansas State spring football, and that's just a huge advantage. 13 high schoolers in all, 4 from the state of Kansas, 4 offensive linemen, and they've got some skill guys too. They're a little bit more plentiful on the offensive side of the ball because of those offensive linemen. I believe it broke down 9-6 offense against defense. And it's odd that it is such a small class, but they've got some really fun guys in here. And we'll get to all of that when Ryan Wallace, our recruiting editor at Go Power Cat, joins us later in the show. And Cole Carmody, our recruiting writer, also hops in for a 3-man show as we really dig into the type of players and the quality of players that K-State got out of this class. But first, we are really pleased to welcome to our show Kansas State football coach Chris Klieman, who is wrapping up his very busy day in an incredibly busy stretch for any college football coach. And tonight they're going to have their Christmas party, and everyone gets to go to bed early because practice really starts full-fledged for the Pop-Tarts Bowl on December 28th in Orlando. That is 1 day short of a week away. We are coming up on 1 week away from the bowl game. And I tell you what, it is sneaking up on everyone. K-State is about ready to go full force into prep for K-State, North Carolina State down in Orlando. Everyone leaves on December 23rd, including Zach Carlson and Cole Carmody from our staff. But let's quit messing around. I see Coach Klieman is standing by, and let's bring in Coach now. Steal a little bit of his time before he has a celebratory fresca with his fellas. And now we welcome in the head football coach of Kansas State University, Chris Klieman. A long day, Chris, but not much different than all your days since the end of the season. But this has to be nice to kind of have this phase of the recruiting process over.
Yeah, really productive day. Recruiting staff did a phenomenal job. Coaches, support staff did a great job. We landed a bunch of players, a number of kids that are mid-year guys, but guys that we've been communicating with, building relationships for a couple of years, and then a couple that we've been building relationship just for the last few months.
Yeah, it's interesting now. I mean, there's 15 recruits in this class, which is a small number. That used to be alarming, but now with all the other changes in the game, I don't want to say it's easier to get at 85, but you do add in the transfer portal. You're still seeing the COVID year bonus season. This might be it for it, but those tend to lead to smaller classes, don't they?
Yeah, they really do. And, last year it was interesting. We had our signing day, and then I didn't learn about maybe 7 or 8 super seniors until after the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah.
Well, this year we heard about those guys a little bit earlier, which definitely helps. Getting to 85 is a task. Sometimes it doesn't happen until almost you get to August 1st.
Yeah, exactly. But even though it was small, 13 high school, 4 from Kansas, 2 junior college, give me your overall evaluation of this group.
We were going to hit the offensive line. We'd
Yeah.
talked about that since about a year ago, really, and we'd been recruiting some of these guys for 2 years. But knowing we were going to have those super seniors back, we knew we had to replace those guys. And we have a lot of younger players that are ready to get some playing time, but we needed to, kind of restock that room a little bit. So it was great to get the size and the length we did in the offensive line. And then, trying to get a player or two at about every position, and we were able to do that. I think it was critical for us to keep Blake Barnett, and got a chance to go out and see him and his family last week, and really good, really productive, and excited that he's joining us.
He seems like a kid that wasn't going to waver. I mean, he seems like he was locked in on Kansas State. Am I reading that right or wrong?
Yeah, no, he was definitely locked in, and he'd spent a number of times here, and I've communicated with him an awful lot throughout the entire year. Not that thinking anything would happen, but your quarterback's pretty critical now, and so I really wanted to make sure that I kept building a relationship with him. And like we talked at the press conference, I hope it's never one person that's keeping a guy or is why a reason that you come. I know it's important that person is, but I hope it's a village of all of us that are going to impact somebody's life.
Yeah, that's a great point. Any needs in this class that kind of went not fully realized, and maybe you need to work on that for the late signing period?
Yeah, what is the late signing period anymore for starters?
Not,
I
it's
mean, that's
ridiculous.
the challenge. That's the challenge is from a high school standpoint. We're going to have to wait for another few days to a week to say, okay, who's left out there that decided to wait till February, because if there are, then maybe we could look at that as well as from a transfer standpoint. I mean, you're always continuing to develop your board. It's always continuing to have the next guy available, because you just didn't never know, and that's what makes roster management so difficult right now.
Are we in a phase here with the transfer portal now where um, you almost have to kind of hold off? It sounds weird. You're going to need these players, but you also want to make sure it doesn't disrupt your current roster leading into the bowl, leading into the second semester classes.
Yeah, it's just it's evolving every day. I think all of us coaches feel that way. That you never can have enough of a position. You always are looking to see what's next at a position. And in reality, offensive line's an interesting thing because all the kids that we got signed today, I wouldn't think any of them would help us next year. Maybe they could, if they get big enough, strong enough in the off season that they could potentially do that and help us. But now you're looking at anybody from a big skill to a skill position. Can they help you in 2024? And that's one of the things I task our coaches with is, can they help us in 2024? Because if they can't, we got to do a phenomenal job of building a relationship and trying to keep those guys, because we need guys to be able to play because of the transfer portal, because of guys leaving your program. You've got to have those freshmen that can step in and help you.
Yeah, the depth runs out pretty darn quickly. You had a couple late high school additions that I think really help you, particularly at skill positions. Trey Davis and Devon Rice. Watching film, both those dudes can play.
Yeah, they really can. And Trey, we've been talking to for an awful long time. Coach Middleton he'd been committed somewhere else, but I think that program was a little bit in flux, so he kept taking our calls and stuff, and then we were able to bring him up on a visit. And I thought it was a home run for us to get him. Yeah, whew, I'll tell you, the Rice kid, man, he's electric now. And we talked about it. That was one of the things that we thought we missed a little bit this year within our offense. Whether or not he can do it as a true freshman, I don't know. We had a kid in the past that did it as a true freshman, but the fact that he's here mid-year is really going to be important to us, so that he can get a lot of reps, because probably not going to give DJ that many reps in the spring. So other guys are going to have the opportunity, and he's one that's going to. And then the other one that we got really kind of late, but he came to a camp and performed really well, was Zayshawn Rich, from Minneapolis. Came to camp, which is hard for us to get a Minneapolis kid to come to
Yeah,
camp. And then we didn't know if we'd have a corner spot available. And that's why we kind of held off, but we continued to have great conversation with him. And then when a corner spot opened up, we like what we have with our returning guys. Keenan Garber, uh, Jacob Parrish, um, those guys, Justice James. I think those three kids are really good players, but we wanted to continue to get some young guys, and so we got Zayshawn.
Yeah, it was an interesting. You didn't really lose anything towards the end, but you had some great additions, including two junior college guys, Malcolm Akron Crowder, just an enormous human being
Yeah.
with an enormous name, and Dante Thomas, just my gosh, a fierce safety. You got to love that you found these guys late.
Yeah, we really are. With Dante, he could play a lot of positions. He played corner, he played safety, he played kind of nickel, and we'll plug him in kind of where we need him. But we think he's a really talented guy that has a lot of upside. And we just needed to get him into the program early. He's got good size. He can really run. He'll strike you. So I was excited about him. And then with Malcolm, like we talked, we're trying to find versatile defensive linemen that can be maybe a nose tackle, maybe a defensive end, maybe an inside defensive end, so to speak. We wanted to try to get a little bit bigger in there. We did that last year with Cheedy. We're doing it with a couple other guys this year, and then having more of a speed guy, a la what Mott does and stuff. So that's kind of the adjustment. And one of the things that we're trying to do is develop some more size in there.
Were you just too small at times on the defensive line?
We were, but it was sometimes based on what the opponent was doing to us, meaning getting us into something or a check where, oh shoot, that's what we do, and we put those guys in a tough spot. When we had a lot of our base stuff, I thought we were pretty good. When we were on third down, I thought we were really good because then sometimes you want that speed and that edge and stuff. But some of the base downs, maybe we were, and that's something that. We knew we had to continue to look at, whether it's us schematically making some changes defensively, which we need to do, or us just finding some bigger guys.
Yeah, you found one in Crowder. I mean that finding those type of guys. I always tell people, defensive tackle. You can talk about quarterbacks all you want, running backs, skill guys, but finding those interior defensive linemen who can play at this level is a priority, and it's hard to do.
Yeah, and it's so good to have him here at semester. You look at Uso, and he didn't come in till the summer, so he backed up Eli and had a productive, decent first year, but he really came out of his shell this year and played really well.
Yeah,
And had we had him at semester, maybe it'd have been different. Had we had Javon Banks at semester, maybe it would have been, maybe could have plugged him in a little bit more. But getting Malcolm at semester is so critical for us, so that we can get him in with Coach True in the winter conditioning, get him in the summer stuff, get him to fall, get him to spring ball. We have some depth in there, and that's something that we probably lacked a little bit, at least inside. We always had outside depth at D end, but we lack some inside depth at the bigger defensive linemen.
yeah. That's one of the huge changes in college football. You used to have a couple kids that would show up early, and now you've got 9 out of 15. And
Yeah,
it's not just important for their development, but as your roster's in flux and with injuries,
yeah,
just a couple of years ago, you about ran out of bodies. You need those guys for practice.
yeah. You really do. With him, we don't, knock on wood, we don't have as many off-season surgeries planned right now, but we do have a handful of them. Plus, we still have some guys recovering that got injured this year. I'm mixed on the mid-year. My son was a mid-year at Kansas Wesleyan, which he was the first one in NAIA history probably. But some of those guys are coming in because they want to develop. Some of those guys are coming in because they want the opportunity to maybe play a little bit earlier, want the opportunity to get into a college weight room, college environment. But I'm also a parent and a dad that I want to make sure if I have a chance to see my son, like Caden Massey's going to go try to win a state championship for Linden in basketball, and they probably got a great chance. Go experience that. Go
Yeah,
do that. You're going to get to college soon enough. And so I'm mixed on it. I think there's positives on both sides.
I'm trying to imagine Caden Massey on a basketball court against that level of competition. Yeah,
It was funny. I took my wife to watch him play a game this year.
you're so romantic.
Yeah, I know it. I'm hey, you want to go on this great date? I'll buy you a box of popcorn. We shared it, of course. And we walk out there, and she said, "Now, which one are we here to see?" And I said, "Just look out on that field." Oh, okay. I know which one we're here to see.
Having basketball to watch him in has got to be really valuable because let's be honest, he's not getting challenged at the line of scrimmage with a physical one-on-one matchup. They're cutting him, they're doing a bunch of stuff to him to try to prevent him from being so dominant. So seeing him as a multi-sport athlete gives you a pretty good picture of who he is.
Absolutely. Just love being able to see him move around and bend and run, all those things. I think it's a great benefit for us to have him there.
Gus Hawkins. I mean, this dude roared up the 24/7 national rankings. Ended up in our top listing. He's pretty darn good, isn't he?
He's good, and the great thing is, Fitz, I think he's just scratching the surface.
Yep.
And that's kind of where probably people saw him going up those rankings as well. He's a big athletic body that's really raw, can really run, can really bend. I know this. He's at one of the best high school programs in the country, not just in the state. So much respect for Joel and what he's done at Mill Valley. We have a lot of Mill Valley guys here that have had really good success. And so he's ready to work. He knows how to work. And it's what a great kid, phenomenal kid, and we're so excited because we think we're going to be able to put some good weight on him in that first year, and he's athletic enough that he's got a chance to play pretty early in his career.
4 players from the state of Kansas. I think the release said it's the 15th year you've had 4 or more from the state of Kansas. It's just impressive because let's be honest, some years Kansas doesn't produce that much talent,
Yep.
but K-State gets its share. How important is that?
It's really important to be able to win in state. It's really important in the locker room. It's really important in community service. It's really important when we're going around the state to have Kansas kids. We've got a handful of walk-ons that you're going to learn about here too from the state of Kansas that we're excited about. But we need to be able to win and take a whole crew over there when we go to Lawrence or when they come here. We want to make sure that we have as many Kansas kids that it means a heck of a lot to play for your state school.
The walk-on program has been so beneficial to Kansas State, and I know every program does it. Nebraska, built a huge living off of it back in the day. But the state of Kansas, because of the rules for high school football, you don't get as many games, as much coaching, off-season stuff. The emphasis is on multi-sport, which I appreciate because that's really important too. But also means sometimes the high school kids are a little less developed than maybe Texas or Florida. So that walk-on program is huge. Come in, prove yourself, you're on scholarship.
Absolutely. And, I look at a kid like Austin Moore that did that and bet on himself. And the one thing that Austin would tell you is, I didn't get treated any differently. Nobody would have known if I was a walk-on. Nobody would have known if I had a scholarship guy. I had all the same gear. I had all the same opportunities. I got the same coaching. I got challenged as much. Everybody knew who I was. And all I had to do was have a little bit more of a chip on my shoulder in scout team, which he did, to make sure I got noticed. And I think that's something that when walk-ons come and visit our place, and come to practice or hang out, we're like, hey, go talk to those guys. Go talk to Nick Allen. Go talk to Austin Moore. Go talk to Seth Porter. Go talk to the Landry brothers. Go talk to those guys that, holy cow, you're going to get an opportunity here. And it's the lifeblood, man. It was at North Dakota State for us. I mean, we get so many walk-ons from a smaller state where I'm convinced you can play Division I football if you're from Kansas. You can play Power 5 football, and some of that is later developing. And you just got to get them in here, and you gotta build them. You got to grow with them. You got to get to know them. You got to develop them because it'll mean a ton to them at the end.
How much does Coach True get involved in that, evaluating a kid's physical nature and what he can develop into?
Well, everybody gets an opportunity to be a good chunk with Coach True and his staff when they come on a visit, whether that's officially or unofficially. And Coach True's really good at seeing somebody's body and saying, okay, this guy can get to this. This guy, boy, he's got broad shoulders. Boy, he's got good lower half, whatever it may be. You should go get in front of Coach True. He could probably evaluate you and tell you what you maybe could be. But he's so instrumental. He is so instrumental. He and Scott Troush, Troush from a nutrition standpoint. I mean, grinding on those kids. What'd you weigh as a freshman? What'd you weigh as a sophomore? What kind of eater are you? Do you eat fast food a lot? Do you go out to eat? I mean, all the things that he's trying to pick their brain out of what their habits are, because that's the biggest thing when you come to college is you got to, if you have great goals and stuff, you have to have those habits to match those.
Yeah, they would be proud of me. I put on 50 pounds my first semester.
Wow.
I'm not sure it was quality weight.
You must have grown 3 or 4 inches.
I did actually. I went to college at 6'1" and came home for Christmas at 6'3". So, yeah, it was a transformation. But let's be honest, it was a lot of beer and Dominoes. But this is just such a solid class. What is it about a kid when you meet him? You're like, that's our guy. That's our kind of guy. Is there anything in particular that sticks out? I mean, obviously the physical, can he play and all that stuff, but there's some mental things, some character things that's got to jump out.
Hey, how does he treat his mother when he's here?
Interesting.
How does he treat his little sister that came with him? How's he around his parents? How's he around academic people? Are they engaged? Are they respectful? Do they look you in the eye? I mean, little things that we're all looking at. That character and integrity matter. They count, and you can't fake it.
Staff Christmas party tonight seems like a good night to have it because everyone probably wants to relax a little bit after this flurry of recruiting. But tomorrow in the office, I assume bowl prep just gets going, right?
Well, yes, we will roll tomorrow morning, 7:00 breakfast. Got meetings, I think, starting at 8:30. The only one that I've excused from that is Taylor Bratt, because he probably will let his hair down a little bit tonight. So I don't know if he'll be in there at 8:30. He'll be at practice, but we've got a lot of work to do. We got good work done Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Great off day today. And then we've got to get good work done Thursday, Friday, Saturday morning before we jump on a plane and go to Orlando. And you can tell our guys are, kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, you know what, we're going to be a week away from a game tomorrow, rather than feel like, hey, we're just practicing to practice. We got game plans in. We're going a lot of development versus development. We're doing a lot of good on good. And you start to see that intensity come up a little bit.
It's crazy. You come out of recruiting. You mentioned at your press conference, previous one before today, that you hadn't looked at NC State. So you're phased into all this other stuff, and then now we're a week away from a game. It's nuts.
Yeah. Now, I mean, the coaches have done a great job.
Sure.
Assistants Monday and Tuesday of really digging into that film. I've been still doing a lot of recruiting, a lot of phone calls. Got into a little bit of film, but now for me, after tonight, I'm jumping right in, putting my phone down some, and watching a bunch of NC State offense and defense. They're a really good football team, really well coached, and it's going to be a challenge for us because we're going to have a lot of new kids, a lot of young kids playing, and we're going to make some first game mistakes, even though it's game 13. But we got kids that want to be here, they're busting their tail, and I'm looking forward to seeing some guys grow and develop.
Are you excited or nervous about what you might see from a team of so many younger guys?
Both.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that these guys understand that this might be the best thing they have to get them ready for 2024.
Correct.
Is it going to be flawless? No. I mean, we're going to make some mistakes, and we got to live with some of those mistakes with some of these younger guys at all positions. Everybody thinks quarter at all positions, because we also know we're going to make some splash plays with some guys, and we're going to go, holy cow. And people are going to go, wow, that guy's going to be here for the next X amount of years, or wow, that kid's a future at whatever position.
Yeah. Coach, I appreciate it. Get your party. If Brad ever asks, should I have another one? Tell him Fitz says yes. He deserves
I will
it.
definitely do that. So happy holidays to you.
You bet, Coach. That is Kansas State football coach Chris Klieman. And after a short break, the boys will join me to break down the class from the Go Powercat perspective. And here we are. Greetings, gentlemen. How are you?
Doing well.
Wally, are you with us?
I'm muted. I'm here.
Okay, good. Chris Klieman was interesting. It was nice of him to carve out some time before the party. Look at Cole getting his shots set. Cole, you wanted the Christmas tree in the background, and you didn't accomplish it.
I know that's what happens when we go these,
that three down the middle. Like,
I know.
we just can't get the background. I'm still in your
Do you want me to
basement.
kick everyone out so the Christmas trees? Like,
People
you can
would
just
like
do the
that,
show?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Let's get after this, guys. Wally, give me your thoughts on this 15-man class.
Pretty good. I released my report card early afternoon. I think I ended up giving it a B. I think that, again, kind of as I wrote at Go PowerCat for some of our VIPs, our subscribers, I think it depends on kind of what side of the fence you fall on. I think that you have a right to maybe hold the defending Big 12 champions to a little bit higher bar. But at the same time, I have to remind those fans, I have to remind myself sometimes that we were sitting here last year, Fitz, and you and I both said last year's class was a rarity in the sense of how talented, how wealthy it was locally. And Kansas State fed off that. And I think by and large, most classes locally aren't going to have what that class had. Now, next year's will. And so K-State gets an opportunity to feed once again in 2025. But this was a class that wasn't as strong locally, that they were going to have to get out and go beyond the state borders a little bit. And so, I think you're not going to have an Avery Johnson to fall back on. You didn't have a George Allen really to fall back on. The 2 4-stars, I guess we ended up with 3 in the state when you count Gavin Hoffman that goes to Iowa. They got 2 of the 3. So they did as much as they could with this class. But also, I think, as I wrote again, it's also about how they finished. And I think they finished really strong. I think they started off really strong. I think there was a little bit of a spell that maybe if you talk to Coach Klieman and the staff, they would go back and maybe revise some of the things that they did or didn't do kind of in the middle of the cycle. But boy, when you talk about how they finished with high school and JUCO, not the transfer portal necessarily, we can get to that a little bit later, but high school and JUCO finished really strong here late in the month.
Yeah, keep in mind, folks, this class release today is about the signees only. No transfer portal guys in this class listed, no preferred walk-ons. In fact, Chris Klieman asked us at the press conference, let's not do that today. Let's let these guys have their day. And then the preferred walk-ons will have another day, which is kind of cool thing. Cole, give me your thoughts.
Well, I want to talk about what Wally said here because the state of Kansas in this cycle was strange, right? I think everybody kept looking at one player to try and separate themselves. Who was going to be the Avery Johnson that really separated themselves and stood out in the state, right? Like you go back to 2023, that's what happened with Avery. You go and look ahead to 2025. I think you're looking at a Lincoln Cure. I know he's currently second according to 24/7 in our rankings. Andrew Babalola's first. But there really wasn't a clear-cut number one player. Even really all the guys were kind of just lumped together when you throw in Gus Hawkins, Caden Massey, and Michael Boganowski. And like you just mentioned, Wally, K-State gets two of those kids, and the 2 they get are the 4-star rated kids. I think people kept waiting on Michael Boganowski to kind of make that jump as far as a recruiting service rating standpoint. And he did. I don't think he progressed throughout his senior year like he would have hoped for sure, and really maybe some of the national scouts would have hoped. Either way, he goes to Oklahoma, but K-State, you look at the kids they got. I look at Caden Massey, I look at Gus Hawkins, and these kids improved significantly from their junior to their senior year. And I think that is why that those guys are so promising because, again, anytime you hear getting better, the scouts are going to see it. The coaches realize that. Gus Hawkins went from a guy who was already committed, keep in mind, who committed at the end of his junior season of high school football, he's committed throughout. It could have been very easy for him to just kind of, throw it in, pack it in, I'm committed, I don't have to worry about anything. Instead, he went out and became a dominant force on a Mill Valley team that, as Coach Klieman just mentioned, won their 5th straight state championship. It's really impressive what those guys were able to do.
Hey, Fitz, real quick, before we go back to you, I want to punctuate what Cole just said because I think it's a really good thought and something that I hadn't crossed my mind until today. There's been so much back and forth within our national team, and obviously they'll seek out myself, Kevin Flaherty, Michael Swain, some of the other guys that are locally here to get our perspective on the state. And anybody that tracked the 2024 class knows that there was a lot of fluctuation there. I think a lot of us, myself included, probably still think that Michael Boganowski is probably the number one player in the state. The national scouts obviously didn't see it that way, but I think Cole brings up a fantastic point, which is our national scouts really like Gavin Hoffman. Some of the local guys like myself like Michael Boganowski. But if you're talking about getting the guys that are trending upwards, K-State got the two that are trending up. Gavin Hoffman dealt with some injuries a little bit this year, and I think maybe he plateaued from the skyrocketing junior year that he had. Boganowski, I think you could make an argument, maybe plateaued a little bit, and I think the national scouts caught some wind of that. But you want to talk about the two guys that really showed significant improvement, Fitz. K-State got both of them.
Yeah. Let's talk about our favorites. I let the cat out of the bag. My favorite. I'm the guy that picks the quarterback, but it's not just because he's the quarterback, but I talked about him on today's Daily Delivery. I love his attitude. He's a warrior. Coach Klieman talked at the press conference today about how he played free safety and annihilated people. And he said, the thought went through my head, Fitz. It's like, I thought about
it, Coach.
Don't do it. Don't do it. But he is a warrior. He's a Colorado sprint champion, led his team to the first state football title, his school, since 97. Cole called that puberty.
I was not born yet. I was not born in 19.
Well, you had early puberty. And I just love him. He played on an injury at the state title game and played through it. And it was a bad injury. I mean, it wasn't just a sprain.
The video of that was incredible, wasn't it?
It looked like it was broken. I mean, we saw Will Howard hobble around, and apparently he was climbing on the bench to lead the cheers of the crowd and climbed in the stands to say hi to his dad. And, that's a K-State kind of guy. But Wally, who do you like the most out of this class?
Well, again, in my grading report, I said Blake Barnett. I agree with you that he was the biggest win, and I don't. Yeah. That's not necessarily just in terms of what he is as a recruit. And again, going back to ratings, I think the 24/7 national team probably did him a little bit of a disservice. I think he came in 10th in this class. Mm-hmm. He is so much better than 10th. For all the reasons that Fitz just mentioned. But again, I think that was a huge win. In terms of another guy that I like, it's hard for me. I think they're going to look back, and you're going to, especially some of those teams that are merging into the Big 12 next year. I'm thinking about, Colorado, Arizona State, Utah, some teams that were real close to Las Vegas, Nevada, are going to really regret not going harder after Devon Rice. I just think that was an enormous steal. Look, I think K-State listed him, and I think it's probably a little generous at 5'9", 180. I know in the spring at the UC report out in Vegas, I believe, he was a lot closer to like 5'7", 170. He might have grown 2 inches. Going back to the puberty comment, he might have grown 2 inches, but there were so many stats when I talked to some of our national guys that were out there. I just said, what's going on? Like, you flip the tape on and you're like, this guy should have more than Kansas State, on him from a Power 5 capacity. And everybody just kind of said, it doesn't seem to be grades, doesn't seem to be character. It's literally just stature. And maybe some, what position does he really fit for us? And I think kudos to Kansas State. I know Josh Buford was heavily involved, the offensive analyst, Brian Anderson, obviously, since Devon is going to start as a tailback. But I think they looked at a guy like Deuce Vaughn. I think they've looked at guys that they've had in the past, whether it be North Dakota State or K-State, and said, to hell with that. Watch the tape. His acceleration is insane. The way that, again, I've written about it, the way he takes an inch and makes it into a mile is incredible. The different things they're going to be able to do with him, even if it's not at tailback, if it's at slot receiver, if it's at punt returner, kick returner, they are going to be able to make an incredible player out of him. I have no doubt about it. He'll get in here as a mid-year enrollee. Tremaine Carroll will pack some pounds on him. And Cole, if he's not part of the rotation early on as a freshman at running back, and he might not be with, learning the blocking schemes, you can't tell me that kid is not going to be at least in the conversation as a returner. I think that's one that they are going to be really happy they stuck with their guns with, and again, gave him the scholarship opportunity.
Well, let it be known too. I mean, that's a recruitment that I don't think really anybody had much of an idea about. You listened to Chris Klieman's press conference today. He even mentioned it. He said we knew him about him in the fall. He came on an unofficial, and we kind of talked to him, and then we really started to talk to him after that unofficial. I mean, this is a guy who was committed to Hawaii, of all places. He never announced he was going to decommit. He was still committed to Hawaii before he ultimately flipped to K-State. So he didn't really talk to anybody about that as far as in the media goes. So that was kind of a recruitment that was kind of on the down low. Are we going to talk about sleepers, Fitz? Because I don't want to pick up somebody that's okay. I'm going to pick my favorite, and that's Jaquise Bradley Demps. This is another kid who's coming in that semester. You know me, you guys know I love offensive linemen, but I have to go with Bradley Demps because K-State this year was seriously lacking that one guy who, once they got the ball, they could make somebody miss and get downfield. For as many flaws that I think all K-State fans will realize Malik Knowles had, the one thing he was really good about doing was once he had the ball in space, he was either going to make somebody miss or find the hole and get down the field. I turn on the tape and I watch Jaquise Bradley Demps. I see Malik Knowles, and it's weird, guys. It is weird. He's built basically the exact same, 6'1", 190, maybe a tad shorter, a bit heavier. But the way he was able to come around on some jet sweeps, the way he's able to catch a tunnel screen and get downfield and make some just acrobatic catches. And again, another kid that K-State was able to flip. North Texas commit. He commits in the summertime. I think that's maybe a reason why some of the bigger Texas schools kind of backed off a little bit, once he was committed to North Texas. But again, credit to Matthew Middleton. The way that he was able to put these receiver class together, we throw in Trey Davis, another one of those Texas guys. I mean, I look at Bradley Demps, another one of those guys that's coming in that semester, especially if K-State doesn't go out and get a transfer portal receiver. I know we think they're going to, but if for whatever reason they don't get that impact guy, this is another one of those guys that can work into the rotation. It's exactly what Jace Brown did.
I'm going to say something, and it might be, it's going to come off as a hot take.
That's my job, damn it.
But to me, I sat back and thought about this a little bit this morning, and I went back and rewatched the junior and senior tapes again. And again, I'm not talking about overall kind of where the two guys that I'm going to mention were and where these two incoming freshmen are, but I'm just talking about, as Cole was talking about, pure ability in terms of the tools and the traits that they're bringing in. In some fashion, you could argue that K-State upgraded in terms of raw ability with Trey Davis and with Bradley Demps versus RJ Garcia and Phillip Brooks. And I know that's going to sound wild, but I think when you look at, again, tools and traits and raw ability, the two guys that left obviously have much more experience, much more polish. But if you're just talking about athleticism, speed, all those types of things, I think you could really make a strong argument they might have just upgraded.
Okay, let's move on to the question Cole wanted to ask because it's from I Like Pickles Cat at Wabash Station. Give me your sleeper, Wally.
I'll let Cole take this one first.
Oh, Cole.
Okay. Well, I have a feeling I know who Wally's going to say, so I'm probably going to steal his thunder here. But it's Dante Strat Thomas. This is a guy who didn't even have a 24/7 profile. Wally had to go in and make him one. The last rating I saw, was he a 70? The JUCO 72-star recruit? Did I see that right?
Something like that. So actually, Cole, he did have one.
Okay.
But I think the name might have been a little off, so that's why we couldn't find him initially. But yeah, I mean, he was buried deep.
Yeah, I mean, this is a kid who I think we kind of was put on the radar as somebody that might visit. He does visit. He gets offered. He commits. I mean, you just look at his story, and I didn't know this, guys, but he played parts of 3 football seasons at Northwestern State. Now, granted, one of those was in the springtime following COVID when FCS played. Then he played that fall. The following fall, transfers to Southwest Mississippi Community College. Guys, he's in this class, but he was born in 2002. So he would be technically a 5th year, if I'm doing my math correctly, coming in. And so I believe he has 2 years to play as well. So this is a kid who has a lot of game experience. And this is also the kind of kid who, Jerome Tang talks about guys that he wants to get it out of the mud, right? Like that's that famous saying that Jerome Tang had at one of his first meetings. And I look at a kid like Dante Thompson, that's exactly what the kind of kid is. You don't go from where he grew up to in Hammond, Louisiana, and go to Northwestern State, another Louisiana school, and then go to arguably one of the worst junior colleges in all of the country at Southwest Mississippi Community College, and then find a way to make it to a Power 5
Yeah.
program unless you have that mentality, and that is going to serve him well. This is not like some of the other junior. I'm not trying to call anybody out, but this is not like some of the other junior college prospects K-State has brought in the past, where they're at junior college because maybe they couldn't qualify, but they still had Division I interest. They're there for a year and then they go. This is a kid who JUCO was his option because that was probably his only option at the time. And the fact that he was able to put that tape together, I think this is going to be a steal. And dare I say, I like Strap Thomas more than I like the kid that K-State just got from Ball State. I don't know if they're going to play the same position or not, but those two guys are going to be competing, and he is going to think about Reggie Stubblefield. He didn't take a single play for granted. That's exactly Strap Thomas's mentality.
Yeah, his tape starts with an attempted murder. I mean, it's a flag probably in the Big 12, but it's still, I like the attitude he played with. Wally, give me yours.
Yeah, I mean, well, just to piggyback a little bit off what Cole was saying about Strap, I think what's makes him a good candidate to be a worthwhile sleeper here is what Cole said. Unlike we'll pick on Big Mac here, right? Alcorn Crowder, the other JUCO guy that Kansas State just picked up from Butler County Community College. You know, obviously there's a lot of buzz about him right now because of how big he is and his ability to slide inside and out. That to me, though, he, like most JUCO guys, and maybe he proves me wrong, those types need a little bit of that transition year, right? Fitz, we always talk about the second year for JUCO guys. That doesn't apply to Strap Thomas because he's already been through Northwestern State. You know, I don't know if the transition is going to be nearly as strong for Strap Thomas. So I think that's a good one that Cole made. I'm going to go with a kid that I don't think is needed right away. I don't think he'll probably play this year, this coming season. And, you know, he might be a reserve even looking at 2025. But I think the ability that K-State will have come that time to stash a guy like Jake Stonebreaker is going to be huge, because this is a guy that committed without a lot of fanfare, doesn't do really any media. I've never really spoken to him. So he's kind of flown under the radar, but he just works. Everything he posts about is just him grinding, and he's got really good athleticism, better than I think a lot of people give him credit for. Real Analytics is a good handle to follow on Twitter. They were the group that clocked Avery Johnson at Texas Tech at, I think it was well over 22 miles an hour this year, his top end speed. Guys, Jake Stonebreaker was a running back, and he was over 21 miles an hour this year on one of his touchdown runs. The guy can run, and, you know, he's a hell of a linebacker too. I wrote about, you know, the question for him is going to be putting on a little bit of weight and proving that he can cover too, you know. And I think the same goes for Boone Morris. Boone Morris has gotten a lot of attention because of all the statistics he's put up, right? He's a robot, tackling machine. But I think Jake Stonebreaker, because of that, has flown under the radar. We haven't talked about him a whole hell of a lot. And like I said, Fitz, he is a really, really upper echelon athlete that I think could go down as a real steal out of Colorado.
Well, he may not be a sleeper, but the way Chris Klieman kind of lit up when he talked about Boone Morris today being a middle linebacker, you could just tell there's a twinkle in his eye, like, we got one here. You know, a physical guy that gets after it. I was really like that a lot. Wally, T and Cap from the boards, maybe this is one just for you. He didn't want to get into the transfer portal today. And honestly, in the world in which we live, if he goes in there and says, I got to go get a defensive end, or, you know, whatever the position is, that reverberates through the locker room.
Yeah.
That room goes, huh? And so we kind of want to stay away from that for now. But he said they're looking at a couple of positions on offense and defense. What do you think those are?
Yeah, smart move by Chris Klieman. That's a veteran coaching move there. You know, I think cornerback has to be one, right? And again, I keep referencing my grades, but they swung and missed on a couple guys at the cornerback position. They end up getting Zayshawn Rich, who, you know, Cole and I have talked ad nauseum about. The upside is there, but you have to remember that Zayshawn's coming from a Minneapolis North program that just doesn't play a lot of great competition. He's going to need a lot of fine tuning. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Jarrell Jones in the sense of that, you know, he's got this athletic profile, but you're going to have to really teach him the position. And so it's going to take some time. Outside of him, you know, I know Coach Klieman mentioned with you, Fitz, in the interview that, you know, Strap Thomas is a guy that has played some corner. maybe he can, but the tape, I don't know if that's really what suits his strengths. Maybe we've talked a little bit, guys, about Marquise Siegel maybe moving out and playing some corner if they need him to, if the safeties develop the way they want to. I still think that they need to bridge the gap from the Jacob Parrish and Keenan Garber to the Donovan McIntosh, Kenigel Thomas, right? The guys that are ready right now and the guys who are probably still another year or two away. So I would think that going out and finding a cornerback is probably a position that they'll look for in the transfer portal. And again, I don't know if you need a bona fide starter, right? It might be kind of another Keandre Thomas situation that they got from Minnesota a couple years ago. So that one comes to mind. It sure sounds like Fitz, doesn't it, that maybe they aren't done on the defensive line, that maybe they could still look for some guys there. I think linebackers pretty well locked up. I think they've gotten some guys now at safety that they're happy with. Obviously, wide receiver. To me, it's skill positions right now in terms of maybe the 2 or 3 scholarships that they still want to use. Maybe running back. I think perhaps you could find a guy that just wants to be a role player that's a veteran there. But for me, I think without a doubt, they're going to go back to the drawing board, see what's left in the transfer portal once some of this, the holiday season and their bowl preparation starts to wind down, and say, all right, let's go back to the drawing board, see if there's some late entries at wide receiver and cornerback. I think, again, with cornerback, maybe more of a Keandre Thomas, just kind of a reserve guy that they can fill in case of an injury or something like that, but they can roll with Keenan Garber and Jacob Parrish. At wide receiver, I think they still need a guy. I think, a guy that he doesn't have to be your number one, because I think Keegan Johnson and Jace Brown have proven themselves. Maybe they get Jaden Jackson back as well, but they still need a guy, to, again, push Trey Spivey, to push Andre Davis, and push some of these freshmen that we've already talked about, and see kind of who rises to the top.
Cole, thoughts on some of those transfer portal needs?
I think the receiver position really depends on how the new offensive coordinator wants to approach the offense, because in the past we've talked about the receiver rotation was so limited, right? Like, and maybe people thought that was Thad Ward when you go back to 2 years ago. This year, people maybe thought it was Matthew Middleton, but I'm almost under the impression that Colin Klein said, okay, these are the guys that can play. These are the guys that are going to play, and that's it, right? We didn't see Jace Brown until the middle part of the year, when I think it was pretty apparent that this didn't just happen, right? He definitely got better throughout the season, but if he plays game 2 or game 3, maybe things look a little bit different for this team. And so I wonder how much of that philosophy changes with the new offensive coordinator. So that's just my thoughts on that. I agree with what you said about cornerback, Wally. I think on the defensive line, you would have to get a guy that is going to be a player. I don't see the point of going out and getting one of those bridge guys, considering how at least the futures we believe that Chidi Obiezor and Jordan Allen both have at that position. I mean, those are 2 guys that hopefully we get to see in the bowl game, at least Chidi, and see, what they have. And maybe that plays into their decisions. How do some of these guys perform in the bowl game? That might kind of tell them. But as far as the offense goes, I mean, this is an easy test. Go get Cody Schrader, go get a Cody Schrader from a Truman State or a Pittsburgh State, some guy that wants to prove themselves. You know what? Why not throw a wild card out there? I think that might be something they would be interested in too.
Okay, let's go back to Wabash Station. I'm not sure I really want to read this question, but I do want to read the name. This one's from Harry Dengler.
Oh,
yeah. I don't understand what that means. Compare and contrast the recruiting philosophies between K-State and KU. KU put together a pretty darn good class. They're thumping their chest. And it was a good class. I like what Lance Leipold's doing. I think he's a good coach. I think this rivalry is going to be fantastic for years to come. But they also had 0 Kansas kids, which bugs the hell out of me. Wally, give me your thoughts on the 2 different philosophies.
Well, in KU's defense, I think they've put together a pretty worthwhile preferred walk-on class that does feature a lot of local talent, at least in comparison to what Kansas has done on the preferred walk-on scene in some of the eras before the Leipold regime took over. I think they've done a really nice job going out. Here's the thing. It's 2 completely contrastive, 2 completely different styles, I guess you should say. I think that Kansas is trying to make more inroads with the Kansas high schools and the coaches and things like that. And I do think that maybe we'll see that come to fruition a little bit in 2025. But K-State is so good locally, and I think some of that has to do with the carryover that occurred from when they arrived from North Dakota State. It's not just Taylor Bratt. I mean, retaining Taylor Bratt was enormous, but also keep in mind, like Connor Riley and Chris Klieman were grabbing guys from Kansas and Kansas City when they were at North Dakota State. So they already had, some relationships built around this area. Lance Leipold did not. They did. Obviously, there was no reason to retain anybody recruiting wise from the staffs previous to them. And so I think they've really had to start fresh, whereas Chris Klieman and them still had some connections. But again, I think you could make a strong argument that Leipold and them maybe do a little bit better job out of the state, and Kansas State does a little bit better job locally. The other thing that I would say about Kansas's class, and I know Michael Swain and Kevin Flaherty, our colleagues, would crush me for saying this, but they struck gold at Desert Edge in a similar fashion that Andre Coleman struck gold at Tucker, all those years ago, where they just kind of stumbled upon a group of guys that happen to be really highly rated, that are also teammates and really close friends. And again, it takes a knowledgeable recruiter to figure that out. So it's not like KU just struck luck there. But again, with Andre Coleman, for those that don't remember, that was the class where they landed Justin Hughes the class before that, I believe, as a gray shirt. And so they had already kind of been in Tucker for a little bit. And they go back down, and Justin Hughes knew Duke Shelley, who was a year younger. So they got on Duke Shelley fairly early. Duke Shelley happened to be like best friends with Isaiah Zuber. They came up on their visits in the summer together, land those two guys. And then Auburn tries to pull the weird gray shirt, blue shirt at the last minute on Elijah Sullivan. And Duke Shelley and them were like, hey, you should come to K-State. And Andre Coleman already had built a relationship with Eli Sullivan by that point. So they landed like all four of those guys, and just because they were buddies. And again, that kind of happened with KU in the Desert Edge class this year. So kudos to KU. They've really picked it up in recruiting. But yeah, they're going to have to pick it up too in the local recruiting scene. And it's interesting because when we went around this offseason, myself, Kevin Flaherty, Michael Swain, and a lot of the high school coaches talk very highly of KU and their staff and the way that they're recruiting guys. But it also doesn't bode well for the Jayhawks that, the one guy that it seemed like all of the high school coaches really enjoyed conversing with and communicating with from the KU, Andy Kotelnicki. He's not there anymore. So they'll have to start over to some degree. But 2025 Fitz is a make or break class for Lance Leipold's staff. They whiffed on 2023 really badly locally. They whiffed on 2024. But again, we talked about Michael Boganowski was really the only guy they sought after as really wanting, probably Caden Massey too. They're all in on 2025. And if they go 0 for again, or if they only go, 1 for 7, 1 for 8, you're going to have to start reevaluating your local recruiting staff and try and find a Taylor Bratt and try and bring in some guys that have a little bit more firm roots in the Sunflower State.
Absolutely. Cole, the transfer portal really muddies the water with recruiting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I brought this up earlier in the show. You don't need to fill a class anymore. If you miss on some guys, which K-State did, if you have some openings, you don't have to go find that kid that's, let's be honest, a filler that might pan out, but you really didn't want to sign him. That's the old way. Now you just leave that opening and go hit the portal and find an experienced player.
Yeah, it kind of feels like, you think back a few years ago, and K-State's had these players in the past where if they don't get their guy at that position, well, then they just go to that next guy on the board. And I don't think K-State really did that this year, right? Like I even go back to the Michael Boganowski thing, and this whole time we're like, okay, well, if they don't get Michael Boganowski, then who are they going to get to play that position? And they just didn't really fill it. And I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Like, you're at a point with your roster construction, especially now for K-State, to where, all right, if you don't get somebody, then you trust the guys that you have, the guys that have stayed around, and then you go fill through the transfer portal. And, when Wally and I did our live and we talked about the retention rates and all this, we got into the weeds a little bit. The way that roster construction is handled in 2023 is completely different than the way it was handled in even 2020 or 2019. And I think coaches are still trying to learn how to adjust to that. I think players are having to learn, okay, just because they bring, a transfer guy in doesn't mean that they don't want me here. Maybe it just means they want somebody to compete with me. Maybe it just means they don't maybe believe in the guy below me, right? So there's so many different moving parts. And I think that teams are still trying to figure out the best way to not only keep guys, but also add players that they feel like they need.
Okay, Wally, the next question everyone has is preferred walk-ons. Coach Klieman didn't want to discuss that. We will go in depth on that later, but just give me your overall thoughts on where K-State is with that.
Yeah, I mean, so far it's a really good class, and they've still got some outstanding offers that are out there that did not make a choice, or at least make their choice public at this point. So some guys that are going to kind of see what comes about in January, and that's probably wise of them, right? I mean, if you have a preferred walk-on offer, you don't have to commit today unless that's the one you want to go to. So there's some guys out there that are hoping that maybe there's a scholarship offer, whether it be K-State or somebody else that comes along in January. So still some ones out there that I think K-State will push to get. But as far as what we know, they were able to land today in the preferred walk-on market. Obviously, the big one is Navarro Shunke. He is the #1 rated player in North Dakota. K-State got him as a preferred walk-on. Really good offensive lineman who, got some interest offers from Auburn, a couple other regional offers, and probably would have had a lot more interest. But he was debating whether or not he was going to go collegiately for wrestling. He's an outstanding wrestler and waited kind of until I believe it was early in the football season when he said, you know what, I've decided I'm going full football. And by that point, K-State was the one school that had really stuck with him through and through. And they end up getting a really talented player. I think he'll probably land at center or guard. And obviously that wrestling background will fit him well in the interior. Great get for them as a preferred walk-on. Balances the line out really well. Holden Bass is a guy that's now a 2-time state champion here in Kansas, and a guy that I think really, we talked about earlier on about Gus Hawkins and Cade Massey, how they progressed as seniors. Holden Bass has been on our radar since he was like a sophomore, has been coming to K-State camp since he was a sophomore, and a guy that honestly we thought might get into the top 5 range in the state. He never quite got there, kind of dipped a little bit, I think, as a junior, and then came back so strong as a senior. Cole, I don't know if you remember at the defensive line elite camp, he went one-on-one with Gus Hawkins over and over and whipped Gus Hawkins pretty bad. Now, obviously, Gus Hawkins has taken big steps since the summer. I'd love to see them go at it now, and they'll get a chance to in future practices. But Holden Bass, a really good interior defensive lineman, very, very strong. And again, I think he's added an element of better burst to his game too. Kyan Payne is another guy from St. Thomas Aquinas that they were able to get. Stole him away from North Dakota State. He was going to go there on scholarship. K-State gets him as a preferred walk-on, another state champion from St. Thomas Aquinas. Kyan's got a great motor. I don't know if there's anything about his game that's like elite. Doesn't have one element about him that's, off the charts, but he just goes. Very, very similar to another St. Thomas Aquinas guy that played D-line and preferred walk-on for K-State, Ryan Mueller. But Kyan Payne's got a little bit more size to him, and again, fits more what they want to do with those versatile inside-out guys. Zayden Martinez is a wide receiver from Liberal that committed today, or he's been committed, but I think he announced that he went ahead and signed today. Really big wide receiver, if you want to call him a possession wide receiver, fits that room well in terms of maybe what they need. Truman Griffith from Mill Valley was the initial preferred walk-on commit, and he stuck with it through and through today. He's coming off an ACL injury, but Joel Appleby at Mill Valley told me in the offseason the one guy that coaches were talking about other than Jaden Woods when they were coming through in the offseason was Truman Griffith. He was going to get FBS scholarship offers had he not gotten injured before the season. That will end up, if he rehabs and gets back to full strength, that will be a steal for Kansas State on the defensive line. And finally, Cole from Olathe South, Bryce Nornberg, a guy that I watched last year as a junior. He's a quarterback. I went to watch Jordan Allen in the first game of the season, and Bryce Nornberg really stood out to me. plays like a dual threat quarterback in high school, Fitz, but the athleticism is off the charts. And I think they'll plug him in nicely as a slot receiver. Again, kind of a guy that will need some polishing a little bit at that position. But when you talk about the tools and the traits, the athleticism, he can definitely do it. So those were the guys that we know about right now. And then I should add the long snapper, which I didn't know about until today. Picked up a long snapper transfer from Wisconsin, right, Cole?
Yep.
As a preferred walk-on. So those are the guys that I think we know about. And like I said, I think they'll add more to that during the month of January, and then we'll highlight those guys as we always do in February. But really, really strong class of preferred walk-ons, which shouldn't come as a surprise to K-State fans by now.
Cole, any final thoughts?
I think the more I think back at this whole entire class, and I know Wally's referenced his grades multiple times. I had somebody ask me if you could grade this class, what would you grade it? And I think I said a C+. And, I think the more you look at the kids who are in this class, it's hard to just look at an entire group and say, this is a grade. When you can actually dig into what these guys are right now and what they can be, right? It's hard to do that because of the transfer portal. And so if you're not getting a bunch of instant impact guys, I think the initial feeling is that, it must not be that good of a class. But, I think the more we sit here and we talk about it, and the more I have a chance to just kind of digest all these guys that they've signed, each one of these players possesses different upsides. Each one of these players possesses different floors. Each one of these players possesses different ceilings. But I think the one thing they all have in common is that they are all hard-working kids. I mean, the more you talk to these kids, the more you talk to the coaches around them. That's the one thing that's really stuck out to me. It was obvious that they are going after kids who they not only believe will help them on the field, but they're also going after kids they want to stay and stick around. And so, we'll see, obviously, as what the retention numbers look like. But I think that the group of kids that they have, they might not be as close as the 2023 classes were, but there's a lot of talent there, and I think there's a lot of care there. And I think that's something that K-State has an advantage over maybe some other schools when it comes to recruiting philosophy. We'll just have to wait and see.
Well, I'll give it a close up. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I guess, for me, we always talk about how I'm the negative Nancy of the group, and I've been pretty positive. But I think the one hang up that I still come back to with this staff, and, I almost wonder at this point maybe if Chris Klieman would admit it privately. It's not something that you want to put out publicly, but to me, the transfer portal is still an area that they haven't really figured out. And I don't think they've really tailored the transfer portal to what they're trying to do at the high school ranks still. This is a class that, as Cole said, let me go positive spin here. They continue to elevate recruiting.
Yeah.
The floors on these kids are not nearly the floors that we were seeing in 2020, even 2021. But because it's K-State, because of kind of where they are, and the blueprint is always going to be projects and developmental, they're going to always have a large dose of, if you want to call them flyers, of projects, of guys where you're kind of trying to see down the tunnel to the upside, but knowing that it might take some time to get there. And again, I think if you continue to recruit a class that is so heavy on projects, you have to balance that out then in the transfer portal with guys that are no doubters. And, again, I think Easton Kilty is going to end up being a no doubter. And so I don't want to disrespect Travis Bates and Jordan Riley. But again, I think you have a little bit higher hopes that if this is the class you're going to bring in from the high school ranks, mostly guys that Chris Klieman even admitted, at least when he's talking about the offensive line today, guys that he doesn't see playing next year, right? And that's fine. But I think that's probably across the board in this class, give or take one or two. Then you've got to go out and get transfers that, are no doubters, and maybe some guys too that have multiple years of eligibility. So they did get that in Travis Bates. And I can't remember if Jordan Riley has maybe 2 years to play as well too. So you kind of have to balance it out. And I don't know that they've quite done that yet with the transfer portal. I love the fact that they are saying, you know what, we've been in the FCS. We know there are guys in the FCS, or even, group of 5, group of 6, whatever we're going to call them moving forward, because we won't have a Power 5 anymore. But we know that there are players that can play good ass football in those leagues, conferences, what have you. But also, is it a surprise that the two best guys that Kansas State has ever gotten out of the transfer portal were a guy from Iowa and Louisville, and Julius Brents and Russ Yeast? Two guys that played Power 5 football, that were recruited very heavily, and that K-State was able to get out of the portal. So again, I think they've got to find a way to get in on the portal earlier, get after those guys, because they didn't do a great job in terms of connecting on their visitors this year. They got the JUCO guys that they had visit, but we saw them swing and miss on some receivers. And I know it's hard when you don't have an offensive coordinator. That's a tough sell to get some of those receivers and things like that. But to me, they've got to figure out if this is the way we're going to attack the high school ranks and the junior college ranks, we've got to balance that a little bit better with the transfer portal. And we've got to be earlier to the transfer portal as well. And maybe that's adding to the staff. Maybe that's just designating a guy on the staff to be the transfer portal guy. We've talked about this, Fitz, ad nauseum. I wouldn't surprise me if maybe that's something that they start to discuss. But overall, again, Fitz, a really good class in terms of raising the floor and continuing to keep K-State from slipping. I don't think this is a class, whether you call it a B class, C+ class, they're definitely not regressing. This is a class that you can be proud about. And again, a class that they didn't have to hit a home run on because, as we've said, 2023 was foundational. 2025 is really, really special. They could afford to kind of have a good class, knowing that they might have a great one coming up.
Yep. The state of Kansas is absolutely loaded in the 25 class. And these two guys will be all over it. Ryan Wallace, you're one of the best in the business. I appreciate all your work. Cole,
I'm going to go have a drink, guys.
Yeah, I think that's what the entire football staff.
Chris Klieman's having one, right? We can have one.
They're getting after it right now with a 7 a.m. work call. You guys can sleep in. Well, Cole, you can't. Are you still teaching children, or you're on break?
All we have is a work day tomorrow, and then I am going to go to Kansas City and watch some gray uniforms. They're gray, by the way. They're not black. They're gray.
They look black. Good scoop, Cole.
I was told.
Oh, they're black.
Interesting.
That's it for the show. A lot of great topics that will be coming up in coverage at Go PowerCat there at the end. 60% off right now at GPC. We appreciate everyone listening. We appreciate Coach Klieman making time in his very busy day to talk to everyone. I'm reading in the comments. We got some audio things going on. I know my volume was peaking with Chris, and I have no idea why. But we'll get that addressed. We're going to get Cole a different setup because it sounds like he's in a box apparently. But the truth is, he is in a box, a big green box. That's it for this edition of GPC Live. Don't forget, everyone, we're going to have a Fitzcast for the bowl game. Two of us will be on the Fitzcast. The guy in the middle will be at the game. We'll be joined by Big B, Brian Hanley, and Ryan Gilbert for the Fitzcast. We're going to sit around and maybe we'll have a cool beverage watching the Cats and the Wolfpack play.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's going to be fun. That's going to be a lot of fun.
And that's it for this one. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate everyone watching. We had more than 200 in here. It was awesome.